Hello and welcome to another exciting podcast of MindShareTV, where we bring you the brightest minds and boldest ideas shaping the future of education. I'm your host, Robert Martellacci of the MindShare Learning Report, and today we have a very special guest, a true trailblazer in the world of education. George Couros is not only a celebrated educator and leader, fellow Canadian, but also a best-selling author of the Innovator's Mindset and one of the most sought-after keynoters on innovation and education as we gear up for FETC, the Future of Education Conference 2025 in Orlando. George will be taking the stage to inspire thousands of educators with his message of empowering students and embracing change in a rapidly evolving world. Thank you for joining me today, George. Happy New Year.
Well, it's Happy New Year. It's always nice to connect back in Canada, living here. Or, that FETC conference is about 20 minutes from my house. So it is a favorite event just because I get to drive there. And it is some really amazing minds and really amazing people. So it's kind of like a reunion every year, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. And in today's podcast, we delve into George's insights on fostering a culture of innovation, leveraging technology for meaningful learning, and how educators can stay ahead of the curve in an AI-driven world and get ready to be inspired and challenged and motivated as we dive into the heart of educational and digital transformation. And it's not necessarily all good stuff and embracing AI potentially. George, talk to me about what's on your mind these days. You're getting ready for your keynotes.
Well, it's funny, you just said to kind of stay ahead of the curve. And I don't know if that has ever been my mentality, is to stay ahead of the curve as opposed to how do we shape the direction, right? Like how do we shape the curve, for lack of a better term? And I think that's something that's really imperative. And do we do that through the viewpoint of a learner first and then actually go through teaching? So I've been, obviously just like, most educators in the world, really kind of been playing, kind of going through some of this stuff. But I also think that we have to develop focusing on wisdom. And I actually have the first talk that I'm doing at FETC is titled this 10 Timeless Principles for Learning AI and Emerging Technologies in Education. And I talk about, the need for wisdom in a time where we have access to, tons of information. How do we develop wisdom? And so I think it was funny because I've been thinking about this quite a bit, as I'm gearing up for this. And I presented on this before, but I also, it's a short amount of time. Like, what are the key points I want to have? And I came home from the gym today and I said to my wife, what was your phone number for your childhood home? And she just rattled it off. No problem. Right. And I said, what's my phone number right now? And she had no clue. Right. And so why would she? It's in her phone. She presses George. She gets, me right away. And that to me is like, we're kind of losing our thinking in many, and I'm not saying like memorizing my phone number is the most important thing when she knows she has access to this, but my brother Alec, who I know you and your audience will know well, we grew up with an Apple IIc, and the ability to actually use that computer, you had to know stuff. Like, it was very complex. And then you think of the very first iPhone, the first one that ever came out that no one has ever seen before. It came with no instruction manual. There is nothing, because it's basically, they took away all of the thinking, and the easier it is to use. And when you're kind of going through this, and is this actually what, we're doing? Is they're actually using this stuff to replace our brain, or we're using this to assist and develop our brains? So that's where I really want people to kind of think about this. I share a clip. And I know it's going to make me sound like a 12-year-old boy. It's from South Park, and it was like really informative. So the teacher's really frustrated because his kids, I think in 3rd or 4th grade, are writing these essays that are mind blowing. Talking about like theories from like the 1800s, and he's so perplexed because he doesn't know this. The kids found ChatGPT, which I know is not the only AI, but that's what they found. So he's frustrated because how hard it is to actually grade these papers. So he goes home to his partner and he says, I'm so frustrated, I can't keep up. And then his partner says, have you heard of ChatGPT? And he's like, no. And then he's like, oh, I'm going to actually get ChatGPT to grade these papers. So basically, if the kids who are not writing anything being graded by a teacher who's not grading anything, so that's where we're a little bit leery of going when we're showing people like, hey, create the lesson plans. You can use these things to create lesson plans for you.
Right.
Are you okay if you're okay with that? Are you okay with kids saying, well, why would I do the essay? I'll just get this to write for me too. So I think we have to be very cognizant of like, how is this actually deepening learning as opposed to replacing? And, like I use it for like prompting on what I write. Everything I write on my personal blog is written by me. None of it's written by AI unless it's explicitly shared. This is actually referenced from ChatGPT. And I think that's something I model. But it is something I'm very passionate about. I want to make sure that I continuously grow in my learning, not have these things replace my learning where I don't know how to do anything on my own.
Well said. And yesterday I heard a term that really resonated on how to see AI, and it was as a thought partner, which really resonated.
Yeah, I was actually there's a gentleman. He has a financial channel. It's called Minority Mindset, and this is probably the first time I heard it. He talked about using this as a second brain, not as like a replacement for your brain, right? And it is like a thought. It can be like you said, it can be a thought partner. There's the reason why I talk about like these 10 timeless principles. I was reading a book from Ryan Holiday, and he's very into Stoicism, which I find fascinating because there's like these two camps right now. There's this camp of like focusing on innovation, AI, really about like looking to the future. But then there's also like this big push towards Stoicism, right? What is the wisdom from, the ancient philosophers? And he I think it's Epictetus. I hope I should be saying that right. I'm Greek. I apologize if I'm not. He said, so I have this, he said, there's a great exchange between Epictetus and the student that encapsulates the truth path to lasting perennial success in any field. Tell me what to do, the student says. Epictetus corrects him. It would be better say, make my mind adaptable to any circumstances. And I think that's what we're trying to really focus on, is that even though that's an ancient philosophy, this idea of that no matter what the circumstances are, kind of going back, I'm not trying to be ahead of the curve. I'm trying to shape the curve and actually, lead in a way that makes sense, as opposed to having this kind of drag me along whether I want to go or not. I'd rather, create the change than actually have it done to me.
Absolutely. And we're helping prepare students for a future that's not clearly seen with the evolution of career pathways. I'm writing a book on the future of work. We're immersed in work and learning every day here at the Mindshare Workspace. We have co-op students. So we're constantly upskilling, reskilling, and supporting startups and lifelong learners. And so that culture of that growth mindset. So it's a great segue to the Innovator's Mindset. Your book, Innovator's Mindset, has inspired countless educators and leaders. Can you share some practical ways teachers can develop and nurture the mindset in both themselves and their students? Because if you're in education, there's no other option than not to embrace the innovator's mindset and the growth mindset, if you will.
Yeah, and it's funny because I wrote the book in I think it first came out. It's actually the 10-year anniversary this year.
Congratulations!
Thank you. Yeah, people still buy it, which is amazing. So it came
timeless.
out 10 years. And that was the hope, right? Is that the ideas and thinking in it. And it's interesting because it's seen a surge in purchasing in the last several years because of AI. And even though I don't talk about AI in the book, the mentality behind what is shared in the book is actually, how do you deal with change in a time where change is not only constant, but it's continuously getting faster and faster and faster. So the mentality that I think I really talk about is, how do you actually, and I think this is where I kind of differentiate, and I'm not saying mine is better than Carol Dweck's work. It is actually trying to be a build upon, right? Is actually the notion of the growth mindset. If I use this in the context of math, how do I actually, learn, really embrace the idea that I can learn these concepts? That's kind of the, a simplified version of the growth mindset. What I'm trying to do with the innovator's mindset is actually, how do I actually do something with this math that I have learned? and actually create something where I see the value and I create something different through the process. And I always talk about the mindsets and the context of playing the piano. Fixed mindset. I could never learn to play the piano. Growth mindset. With hard work, time, effort, I can learn. Innovator mindset. What I will actually do is I will learn to compose. I will learn to create. And it's interesting because I've used that analogy forever.
Great analogy.
And I've actually, in 2024, I bought my daughter a piano. I am 49 years old. And even though I played, for maybe about 3 months when I was a child, I actually have restarted learning. So I've just learned the piano with my 8-year-old daughter.
Cool.
And in the notion, I think this is a really important aspect. I'm not saying it's growth mindset or innovator's mindset. I am in the space where I believe I can learn this music, and I'm really pushing myself. I'm spending about 15, 20 minutes every single day learning this. But I want to get to the point where I actually can create my own music. But I actually have to know the basics. I have to know the fundamentals before I get to this point. So like I said, it's not in opposition to that mentality. It's actually going further, especially in the time we have access to, everything in the world. The interesting thing is that you talk about, we often talk about meaning and seeing relevance. I told you I played piano as a kid for several months, but I hated playing it because I was playing music I despised. And, I was playing basically what my music teacher had access to whatever. And you have to learn some of these basic skills. But now I can hear a song and say, oh, I like that song. I'm going to go into YouTube and look for this song plus piano plus easy version. So that's where I'm starting. And and hearing stuff that I'm actually very interested in actually pushes me, as opposed to playing, my brother Alec will know Fuzzy Little Bunny. That's like one we know from, played it. That was like literally our recital song. And it actually is interesting because my daughter and I went to Wicked recently, and she loves the song Popular.
Yeah.
And as soon as I went to that movie, we both love the song. I go and we start looking, and she wants to play it. And so she wants to get better because she likes what she's playing. But then she also sees the importance of the fundamental skills to get even better. So she's not looking up easy version. She's looking up actual version so she can play that. Yeah.
Actually, I did the same thing when my kids were in piano. I was taking the piano, sitting there. I said, I might as well take piano too. So I started down that path, and I was able to play a few Christmas songs by Christmas after 3 months. And then I started my master's in ed tech, and I had to put that on the back burner. But I do plan to pick it. I really enjoy it. It's a great distraction. Talk to me about the power of relationships. George, you've often emphasized the importance of building strong relationships in education. As we enter an AI-inspired world, how can educators balance and foster meaningful human connections, integrating technology in the classroom? We hear a lot about AI. It's about HI, human interactions and human connection, HC.
I saw you had written some of these questions down. And one of the things I find really fascinating is there is obviously in education, you hear about this often, there's a lot of behavioral stuff that's happening in schools all over North America. And I don't know outside of North America, I'm sure this is happening in schools across the world. And there's like a little meme. It's like, have you tried relationships? And there's almost like a demeaning of it. Like relationships are nothing. And the interesting thing is I see some principals who are really buying into like saying that, how stupid that is, who are also very focused on knowing their staff, knowing their needs, knowing who they are. And I think when people think about the term relationships, they think about it as like a really fuzzy, like every kid likes me. That's not what I've never advocated for that. That's not the focus. It's actually that I know the student and the student knows me, and how do I bring out the best in them? So like, I think about one of the principals, my assistant principal, when I was a principal who I worked with. I love getting, public accolade. Like I love people saying like, hey, we're so appreciative of George, like your intro was very nice to me. And she was the opposite. She would do incredible things. She wanted no credit. She was embarrassed by it. And the belief and the relationship there is, I know her and what serves her best. that's what I focus on. I don't just like, hey, let's be warm and fuzzy. Let's make everyone feel exactly how I want to feel. And I think that's where it's really important, is that understanding like kids have different needs. So you go back to my daughter and knowing here's the type of music she likes, here's what she's interested in. How do I actually know her well enough? And of course, it's my daughter, right? But like, kind of think about the students. How do I actually know the student well enough where I can leverage some of those things that are really passions, strengths, and how they're kind of motivated to actually leverage learning to see it as relevance. The analogy I often give when I was in school, I know, Robert, you connect with me quite a bit on social media. I'm obsessed with basketball. I took my mom. She's going to be 88 years old. We're at a Magic basketball game. The first one she went to was in her 80s, which was really, really cool. She went a couple of years ago. She loves going. She's so excited because we're going to see Giannis, Greek guy. She's like so excited because we're going tonight. And just kind of like thinking about when I was a kid growing up, I was discouraged from reading stuff that I was really interested in. And there is a gentleman named Rick Riley. He actually wrote the back page article in Sports Illustrated. It was like a one-pager. It was sports related. It had an emotional connection. And I used to rush to the library, go right to that article and read it. I just loved it. It was my favorite. But then I would try to bring that magazine to the classroom. It's like, no. That's not real reading because it's a magazine, right? So it doesn't count for, in the mentality when I went to school in the 80s. The person that I'm most influenced by in my writing today is Rick Riley. The thing that I was actually discouraged from bringing to class was a thing that actually has influenced me the most to teach this. And the reason I bring this up is that people knew me well enough. I love basketball. I love sports. Could I have read, for example, the book, The Jordan Rules? Would that have covered your curriculum and actually had me more interested in reading? Or was I forced to read the same books that, generations to this day are still reading? And I'm not saying you shouldn't read The Great Gatsby or whatever, Shakespeare books like that. But if I am so deterred by reading, because I only am supposed to read what you like or what you think is relevant, then I might walk out of school with the ability to read. I just don't want to ever again. And are we actually killing that? So the relationship is not just I think, and this is where I see some of that pushback, and I think it's fair, is that some people believe your relationship is the end all be all of school, right? And I believe it's the foundation. It's where you start, but how you leverage it to actually, improve learning, understand your kids, tap into their strengths so that they can actually develop their weaknesses. That's where it's really important. And it's not just, you'll notice a lot of times I present, I don't use the term students as much as I use the term learners, because I also believe it's the same thing with staff, right? How do I tap into their strengths as opposed to, hey, I know you hate this thing, but you need to be innovative in it. It's like, hey, I know you're really good at this thing. You should be a leader in our school. And then that actually having that value and feeling that value, because they truly are valued, actually will get more out of them. Which if I can do that for everybody, then our school improves, our school gets better. So if you're saying relationships are stupid in dealing with behavioral issues, then they also must be stupid in bringing out the best in your staff. Or do we see it as a foundational element, or bringing out, trying to bring out the best in the people who serve? Again, not the end all be all, but definitely the foundation.
Well, great philosophy. And, I visit many schools and meet many leaders, and the best leaders that I know have strong relationships. They visit classrooms, superintendents visit schools. They're present, that notion of, making that human connection. That's the secret sauce. That's why teachers will never be replaced. It's that human connection that sparks the student, that inspires them. It's that human ingenuity also that AI can't replicate.
Totally. And that's like if you look at even outside the world of education, Stephen Covey famously wrote The Speed of Trust, that if you actually have trust, you can get things done a lot quicker. And one of the things I used to do as a principal, assistant principal, even at the central office level, as much as possible, I would be physically present in spaces all the time. I'd be outside schools in the morning, greeting kids. I'd be there waving goodbye as they got on the bus. I'd be there during recess. And a lot of people would see that as this, huge time commitment, whereas I actually saw it as an investment that would save me time eventually, because if I have a relationship with a kid, an hour-long conversation when something goes wrong turns into like a 2-minute conversation because it's like, dude, come on, you know better than this, right?
Yeah.
And because they trust you, as opposed to like, what's your name again? I've never seen you in my life, and now like I'm like a police officer giving you a ticket. That's not the best approach, right? It is actually building that, and that's the whole concept of speed of trust, which again, not just an education thing, it's in all aspects of life. The more people like know they're valued and they trust that you're doing things to actually bring out the best of them, the quicker you can get things done.
Absolutely. Empowering students as creators. You've spoken passionately about empowering students as creators rather than merely consumers of information. How can educators design lessons and experiences that allow students to take charge of their own learning in this way? And what is your perspective on storytelling? I embrace storytelling in a big way, whether it's, in the workspace or in the classroom, and preparing people, leaders for the next generation.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I'm looking at the title of the podcast, and it's like leading innovation education. So you and I are both very, passionate about this progression, but you reference something that is actually literally the most traditional teaching practice in human history, storytelling. So I think one of the things that I really try to get people to understand is that it is not about getting rid of tradition or getting rid of traditional practices.
Absolutely.
It is actually about focusing on what works no matter the generation. So storytelling is a very crucial aspect of the work that we actually do. And this concept is innovation is not just focused on new and better or new things, but better things. Like actually, how does this improve learning? So again, kind of going back to the beginning of this conversation, when we're talking about AI, embracing it because it's new is not a good strategy. It has to actually provide something better. And what does better mean? And I think we have to have that conversation. Like, is it better that we're more efficient doing the wrong things? Like, because technology accelerates everything, whether it's good or bad. And so
100%.
really thinking about that. So even and I've been guilty of this. I've used the term traditional practice in what I really meant bad practice. And bad practice can come from any generation, right? So we shouldn't kind of push aside traditional practice. And I say as teachers, if something you're doing that you used hundreds of years ago works for kids today, keep doing it. But don't just do new stuff because it's new either, right? So that's on the focus. So, thinking about that storytelling, I just got off a call, and I really encourage you to check out this school. It's actually the OC, like THEOC.net. It is a school district in Forney, Texas. Very powerful school. And I'll tell you, you'll go to the site and you'll look around, you will not know it's a school. It kind of will blow you away.
Wow.
And part of it is when you kind of look at the school, it's almost like a mall. There's different businesses, there's different sectors, and they're starting with kindergarten, grade 12, and it's a public school in Texas. The superintendent, Justin Terry, and his team are doing some really, really incredible things there. And one of the things when I was visiting there, they actually will have, and I apologize if I'm not, and I'm sure Justin, if he sees this podcast, he will maybe put in the comments, more information. They'll actually have businesses in the community come in and they will rent space through that process. And while they actually rent that space, they'll get a discount on the lease, but the deal in the lease is they have to employ students of the school district.
Wow.
And so what's kind of really interesting is you're looking at this site right now and how you're going, wow, I'm telling you, do not have any clue how good this is from that website. So one of the things that I'm working on them with is really, how do we actually communicate and get that story out about how you're actually empowering your community, like bringing community together, building this with the students, that people actually have an idea so they can think about, how do I replicate this in my community? Maybe I don't do this exact thing, but there's elements of what we're doing. So sharing that story to make that story go viral. And one of the things that they're focusing on is not just having students work for people in that building, but actually working side by side with the owners of these businesses so they learn to develop businesses themselves. Like if you think about the traditional the concept of school, we're kind of training little worker bees, right? Like we're training kids to go work for other people. And that's kind of been the historical context of school, where
Yeah.
they're focused like, how do we actually get our students become the creators of business, that they're actually creating opportunity in that community. So that's where that empowerment comes in. And,
Fascinating.
going through that story. So I really encourage you to check that out, because I just got off a call with them, and it is like almost, and they would actually probably challenge me on this. I'd almost say it's like the end result of what I envisioned when I talked about, what school could be in the innovator's mindset. And the reason they would challenge that is because they know it's a continuously evolving thing. And that's the whole concept, is like the innovator's mindset is not about an endpoint. It's actually about continuously getting better and actually, again, shaping the curve as opposed to trying to catch up to it.
Fascinating. It has, it's reminiscent of our workspace here, where we have interns and co-op students coming in on a regular basis, collaborating and working with us, along with our various companies that are here in this co-working innovation center in a shopping mall, coincidentally. Right. So there's tremendous value in giving students agency, because the students that graduate from this program go on to thrive. We have students in engineering at University of Waterloo. We have business students at Sauder School of Business, UBC, because they graduate with really refined skills. We could talk about the 7 C's, and they're real problem solvers, and confident and resilient, and great communicators, right? Critical thinkers. And so that, that's where, we tend to focus and try to inspire the innovation and leveraging AI as tools to enhance the experience for students. We have our students using AI all the time, but we'll guide them,
right?
And leveraging it for a specific project. It's like your toolbox at home. Around the house, you need to fix something, use the right tool at the right time. You just don't use it to say, right?
Yeah, and I think, Robert, I think that mentality is really important, because there's, and I might get a little controversial here, there's a lot of embracing of Jonathan Haidt's work in Anxious Generation. And I'm sure many people listening to this, and I'm not a big advocate of kids having phones in schools. That's not the argument. Right. But I feel it's such a black and white solution. It's like kids should have phones in schools, or they shouldn't, as opposed to, are we actually guiding kids on how to use this in meaningful ways? Is, for example, Jonathan Haidt really benefiting from sharing a message via social media to build a movement towards schools, while encouraging schools and families not to let their kids touch social media because it's evil? So it's kind of like, that's the definition of gatekeeping, is like, hey, I'm smart enough to use this stuff and actually make a big impact, but I don't think you should teach kids this because it's horrible. So like, if I can actually say, hey, you shouldn't teach this to students, when I've benefited from using my blog, from using social media, it's like, hey, I've benefited. How do I actually teach kids to leverage this? And that's why one of the sessions I'm talking about at FETC is about moving students from the idea of digital citizenship to digital leadership, which kind of goes back to what you're saying. How do we actually get kids to not only see the opportunities to, of how digital citizenship matters in our society, but actually leverage this to help themselves and help other people across the world? I think that's something that is really, really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Let's shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
I just got off the ice at lunchtime playing faculty hockey at York University, my 30th year. You had a workout this morning. Talk to me about the importance of balance to nurture well-being and that innovator's mindset. You can't be all work all the time at your computer. You need to get outdoors. You need to be in nature. You need to be around your family. And educators tend to be selfless. Well, at our summit this fall, and we're going to have you keynote next year. You heard it here first. I gave away workout shirts. I said, nice, long sleeve, because it's cold up here in Toronto, workout and use them for going out, get outdoors, whether you're walking, running, whatever you choose to do, be active.
Totally. And that's like, I know you've known probably since 2020, 2020 to 2021, I think I lost about 120 pounds. And I think that's a huge accomplishment. The
Amazing.
bigger accomplishment is I've maintained that same weight within like 5-10 pounds over the last 4 years, which
that's
is
impressive because that's rare. That's rare.
It's hard, and it's definitely hard to do that. It's something, my genetics, my eating habits, growing up in a restaurant in a Greek family are not conducive to this, right? So it's something I've had to learn and get better at over time. But what I have found is that when I ensure that I have time, and for me personally, in the morning, if I have to keynote at 5 a.m. somewhere, I will be up at 3 to work out, because I know that it will clear my mind. It will kind of wake me up for the day better than any coffee, things like that. And what I've actually found is that it's again, looking at things as investments. An investment is something that if you put into it, eventually it will bring you more. What I found is that when I invest, even I did a video on this. If I feel like I have no time to work out, do I have 10 minutes? Because if I have 10 minutes, that's better than 0 minutes. It's like the 100%. Same thing. If I invest $10 in like a ETF stock over time that, captures the S&P 500, or, where that's VFE in Canada, VOO in the US, $10 a week might not seem like much, but doing that for 30 years, it's going to add up very, very quickly. And it's the same thing. 10 minutes here is better than 0 minutes. And I think that to me is really thinking about like, how do I, energize my body? The thing that has really transformed for me is not I've always exercised. I'm sure just like yourself, played sports, things like this. It is really thinking about my healthy eating habits. And boy, might be a little controversial. Schools are like cake central, right? Like it's almost like, hey, it's someone's birthday. This thing is going on. There's cookies in the staff room. And I get really, and I know this is, not everyone will agree with me, and that's okay. But for me personally, sometimes the things I've deemed in the past as self-care actually fell a little bit into the point of self-destruction. And how I kind of identify that. How do I feel like 30 minutes after I do this? Like, does it make me feel better, or do I feel worse? Right? Do I feel horrible? I'm not saying like I'm going to a basketball game today. I'll tell you, I'm going to have some cookies, I'll have some cake, but I try not to overdo it when I used to. Like that used to be a treat. That used to be the norm. And when I started realizing I was going to eat healthier, when I started realizing it was healthier, like that my norm was that feeling gross. And then I started eating healthier. And I'm like, oh, I'm not supposed to feel that way. That's not a good thing. So I think it's really being thoughtful of like how you fuel your body, trying to, and for me, you cannot put that stuff in front of me, right? Like it's not in my house. Like it might be at the game, and that's a different thing. But if it's in my house, totally different thing. So you have to learn your own strategies to, not just think about like I just posted a video right before we got on here. Every morning when I wake up, I think about something I'm really grateful for that I currently have, whether it's my kids, my wife, my family, my dog Suggs, just blessings I have, and really appreciating what I have really matters to me. And then I try to visualize like, hey, I know I got these things ahead in the day. If I'm going to do these things, what do they look like if I'm successful? It sets me up for, a really powerful day. And then I actually move. I do some movement, whether it's this year, or whatever. I don't know why it started in October. I said, I'm going to do 500 push-ups a day. So I do them like 50 at a time, 60 at a time, 40 at a time, 30 at a time, until I hit 500. And having that little, every time I hit those 500, it's like I've won. I've already won something to the day. Yeah. And so I do that every single day. So like share gratitude, visualize the day, move. Those things really have kind of helped me set up the day. And I feel this is what's interesting. Spending that time has actually made me better in what I do, made me more thoughtful, more mindful in what we're doing. So I think a lot of people see it as like, I don't have time, as opposed to you actually can use your time in a better way when you're feeling healthy, when you're, your head is more clear. So like as you said, I get outside every morning with my dog. That really, really helps.
Yeah. I do the same with my daughter's dog. It's her dog, but we often spend more time with the dog than she does. But great advice, great philosophy. I hope educators are listening and embracing. I want to offer up a book that helped transform my life style, and that's outlived by Dr. Peter Attia, who's a Toronto-born medical doctor trained at USC, and he developed a prevention mindset. So he talks about well-being, nutrition, cancer triggers, sleep, diet, and exercise. And I'm going to get you a copy of that. And
I love it.
And I'm hence a great segue. I'll be seeing you next week at the Future of Ed conference in Orlando. Final thoughts to share, George Couros.
No, I just always appreciate. I think one of the things that's really, and I'm really appreciative of, is I grew up in a Canadian system, and I had amazing teachers, amazing school experience, and I'm not just talking as a student, but as a staff member. And being in the U.S., I know a lot of people really appreciate my insights because of what I learned through kind of going through the Canadian system. And I think there's a beauty because there's a lot of things we can learn from here, and a lot of things that hopefully they can learn from us in Canada. So yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I know that you're having an event at Can-Am, event at FETC. So I'm looking to see all the. Am I like a Can-Am? Am I like? I'm like a Can-Am.
Let's hope we don't become a 51st state. That could change the whole direction here. So that'll be for another podcast. Yeah. George Couros.
No one on.
Always grateful for your time. George Couros, author, keynoter, educator extraordinaire. My name is Robert Martellacci of the Mindshare Learning Report. Be sure to check out www.mindshare.learning to get your latest issue. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.